Right, everybody, we'll get started. Thank you. That sounds better. I've got my technician here. What can I say? Right, welcome everybody. Just remind everybody that the meeting is being recorded. It was going to be live streamed, but it's like connectivity issue. But it will be online tomorrow morning. So I would just remind you that it is being recorded, so please just be mindful of that as usual. Right, I'll kick off with apologies. Everybody's here, nothing from that. Any conflicts of interest to declare? No? Right, the confirmation of the last minutes. Anybody want to move that those be accepted? Thank you, Philip. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mark. Any discussion around those? Andrea.
Madam Chair, just a minor adjustment to 6.1. The second paragraph from me was just to basically identify, it says of the school run. We know what it was spoken of, but the school bus run maybe, just to a little thing. I don't know. Yeah. Buses. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Right, any other discussion from anyone? Right, I'll put that motion with that slight amendment to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? That's carried. Right, any matters arising from those minutes? No. Right, we've got a deputation from Paul from the Sefton Hall Committee, and we've got 4 members of the Sefton Hall Committee here, so please welcome, come to the table and talk to us. And thank you very much for all coming.
Should be all go. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for letting us attend this meeting tonight, and just update everyone on where we're actually up to with the hall itself. It's been an ongoing thing since the 2 earthquakes, 2010, 2012. The hall itself sustained quite a bit of external cracking through the block work and a bit of structural damage inside. We never actually got our insurance company into 2013, possibly due to they were going in all directions with other problems around Canterbury. So once they finally come out here and we sort of talked about what was going to happen. They said that they need to have a detailed engineering report done on the hall. So it was to do with their finance side of it. If it was going to be below their payout cap of $300,000, they would have paid to get the repairs done, and that would have been sorted. But the engineering report come back at well over that, so they quickly give us a cheque for $300,000 and run away. So from then on, we've sort of been getting prices of how much actually it's going to cost to repair it. That sort of grew up to probably near around $700,000. That's just to bring it up to the 68% of the detailed evaluation. At present, the council's given us an evaluation of 37, so we're sort of right down to the minimum. So at this stage, we thought it's another 2 or 3 years slip by, and then we decided to call a community meeting last year, just to let everyone know what's happening and try and get some direction from Sefton community itself. At that meeting, we had a good turnout, and there was quite a few things kicked around. We finished up deciding to do a feasibility study on the community just to see where we stood, if we wanted to repair the hall, rebuild the hall on site, or rebuild the hall in another site in Sefton. So the study was started early March last year. It was completed just before Christmas, and then over Christmas time nothing happened. Then we come into that time when COVID-19 decided to rear its ugly face, so we couldn't do anything for those few months. So we called another public meeting as soon as we could. So that would have been a couple of months ago. The company that actually did the feasibility study actually come and presented it to the community, and it really showed everyone how the population sits now and sort of for the future, the school and everything. Basically had everything that you'd want to know about the area. So it was brilliant. We took a vote at the end of what to do with the hall, and it was pretty close, but it was pretty much everyone we needed to build a new hall. It was a lot of money to invest in the old hall. It looks pretty good, pretty tidy, but internally, removing all the block work, doing the repairs under the floor and all that sort of thing, the money was just getting out of control. So both builders that we had that give us a price were around that 700,000, possibly more. They said, both of them said it wasn't worth doing. There was too many unknown parts to the structure. Also, it's a possibility we'd have had to update the sewage system, which would have put another 100,000 on top of it. So to do the repairs and what money we had in the bank, we would have probably had to raise about $500,000. So we decided, well, if we just take the insurance money of 300,000, if we could sell the hall in 2 sections and a local library and put all the money together, we could end up with possibly $700,000 to $800,000. So we still, to build a new hall up in the domain, we're looking at about 1.3. So we still have to raise $500,000. So it was either we raise $500,000 to repair the old hall, or we cash everything in and go for a new hall, bring it completely up to standard. So at this stage, at our last meeting, we asked Grant to come along, just give us a bit of info on where the council stands up in the domain and whether that is possible for us to do it. So it was a really good meeting. He basically gave us everything we wanted to know. So straight after that we had a vote, and the committee decided, well, let's just go for it. We'll go for the new hall. So that's where we are at this stage. So it's all really up to Grant's crew and what happens here now, whether we can proceed with that. So it's pretty quick.
Thanks for that, Paul. Questions from anyone? Also around the library, the old library, how's the sale of that going, or the sorting out of that one?
Denise might be able to give us a bit of a update on that.
Land ownership has been transferred to the new trustees, but the lawyer is still currently working on the trust side of it, if that can be dissolved. Yeah, so we're not a lot further ahead than we were a few years ago either.
You're in process.
We're in process, yes.
Which is good. Has anybody got any other questions?
Was it Andrew Johnson? I missed one of the meetings.
Put your microphone on.
Oh, that's right. I missed the public meeting, but I was aware that there was a discussion about the interaction of the hall with the school. I just wonder, and that often it's not an unusual discussion to come up. I just wonder where that has got to, what conclusion was reached in that regard.
Yes, definitely a lot of talk from the school. They were worried about losing their car parking area out the front of the hall and that sort of thing. And not so much about, there was a wee bit talked about the location of the hall now versus taking it up to the domain. But really it just come down to like the number of times the school uses it versus the community use of the hall. Yeah. And you know, the feeling was against moving the hall, but yeah, there was no one put their hand up to give us a hand or do anything, so we've just moved forward with the feasibility study, which I think that's the best for the community in the future. Yeah.
Sorry, Paul, it's not a question for you, but I just wondered if Denise, are there any hold-ups with sorting out the trust? I haven't heard from you for a wee while, that's all. Well, that sounds like you're making progress, so that's a good thing.
Paul, could I just ask how public is the decision?
At this stage, we haven't let anything out. There may be just a wee bit of talk in the background, but we're just waiting to hear back from the council and just to see whether that can happen up in the domain. If it can't, we have to rethink the situation here. Another thing, going up to the domain, it allows us to use the hall here until the one up in the domain will be finished. That could be a wee time, depending on raising funds and getting set up for it. But we didn't really have a lot of people sort of against going up to the domain. There was more voiced about car park issues around there, and yeah, I think it's in general at the school. Yeah.
Paul, another question. What is the ideal time frame? Do you have an ideal time frame of when you see it?
No, we really haven't sort of gone down that line as yet. There's a few more hoops and hurdles to go through, and then I would suspect after Christmas we'll be looking at setting up a timeline to raising funds and getting drawings done and actually moving on. I would say it'll be within the next 2 years. And there's plenty of time.
Are you going to put in an application to the council for under their long-term plan for funding?
definitely, yes. There'll be several other avenues we've got to try and pursue at the same time, so it'll be depending on what funds we can just get locally and from the council and from other New Zealand groups that we'll approach.
Well, Paul was probably more of a statement than a question. I think it's really important when you set out on a project like this to have a concept in front of you can show people, and therefore it makes fundraising a lot easier because people can see something concrete in front of them. What I'm talking about is a concept plan. So once that concept plan is out from the community, people can see it, what's going to happen. It's not a final thing, but at least it's a sort of bullseye that people can aim at. Okay, that's just a comment.
With the feasibility study, they did a concept plan of the hall, actually up in the domain. That was just to get a costing, a rough costing. It's probably not going to suit most or some of the clubs up that use the domain. So it's just a matter of working with the clubs and then hiring somebody to do some drawings and that. We really just need to know which direction we're going to go first before we take that first step.
Paul, if I may suggest, you've actually made the first step in a way by saying there rather than here. I think that's probably quite significant and quite positive, yeah.
Yes, I think it was a pretty close one in the end, but at the end of the day it's looking to the future of Sefton. I'm pretty sure the committee is behind us in saying that I'm hoping it'll lift the community and get everyone in behind it. So that's probably our second step of action, is getting the clubs together, everyone who will use the hall and see what they want, and then get a drawing done. Go from there.
Paul, apart from our support, which I can't speak for everyone else, but certainly from, I know the members that have been to your meetings, what else do you need from us as a community board?
Once we've had the okay from the council that we can build up in the domain, the community board, just if they can just get behind us and maybe publicise it a wee bit for us in the community, just really get behind us, that's all we need. So.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions? I mean, on behalf of the community board, I'd like to say good on you for getting to this point, making a decision. I know it has been a journey, but great to hear that a decision has been made. And certainly, yeah, the community board, I mean, as Andrea said, the members, many of us have come to public meetings here, come to your meetings, and talked with you. So yes, there is a high degree of support from us in general. I would also like to say thank you to the Hall Committee. You've done amazingly well. It has been difficult, it has taken time, but you've followed a process, you've consulted with the community, you've made a decision. And I would also have to say that, yes, as you say, the hall looks okay, this current hall looks okay, and to be honest, that is down to the Hall Committee, in particular the custodian, for the way the hall is actually managed. So I would say very well done for that. So we will be following with interest, and I'm sure we'll be pushing the community and green space team along occasionally, and thank you very much.
Cool. I'd just like to thank Dan for coming along to that meeting earlier on here, and that sort of give us some support from the council. He basically said either direction we go that they would help us out, and then Grant coming along and actually clarifying a few things at the meeting, and the support from the community board all the way through. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd actually like to move that we actually request from staff, in particular Grant, that the report that it comes back to the Sefton Hall Committee is actually shared at community board level, please.
Sorry, you're very welcome to stay for the meeting. Actually, I forgot at the beginning of the meeting, there is one correction. In the at the end of the meeting, sorry, it is down as... Ooh, that's not correct. There is an item that is down as a briefing, which is around capital projects for the upcoming launching plan. That is actually a workshop. Just to clarify that matter. Right, any adjourned business? Right, Grant, you're up.
I'm forever apologising that it's not Grant Stevens, but it's me. Same again. So yeah, look, basically with this report that the members would have got, the local Lions Club has come forward. They're keen to put some seats actually within what is the Woodend Community Centre Reserve. So you can see that on the attached plan there, there's a couple of proposed seats, plus there's also a proposed sign. The reason that the seats are angled the way that they are is actually because it's taken into account the ceremonies and so forth that occur there. So that's why they're on opposing sides like that, because it allows a little bit of flexibility for the space. The Lions Club themselves have actually raised the funds for this, so it's cost neutral in terms of CapEx. It's a small operational cost for us to add it into our asset base, but it's not significant in any way. One of the, I guess, other things for the board to consider within this report as well is that there is a potential for a sign to go in. So the club have suggested that they would like a sign. There is no funding for that. There's certainly nothing that we can identify within green space budgets to pay for that. So if it was something that the board were keen on, it would have to come from the general landscaping budget. Just with that as well, it's also worth noting that the naming of the sign itself, it would really have to say Woodend War Memorial, because it is actually on a vested reserve, so we couldn't turn around and call it a different reserve name. We'd actually have to go through a subdivision and classification process to do that, and then also rename it. So that's quite a complicated and quite a long process to do, and that's really as to whether or not the board wants to support the sign going in. So look, I'm happy to take questions at this point on that.
Grant, the location of the seats, what is the reason for them being where they are?
So they were chosen in conjunction with the Lions Club. So they were chosen in conjunction with the Lions Club, but also they wanted to put them on opposing sides so that we had as much flexibility in the space for ceremonies, because they still run a number of ceremonies down there, most notably on Anzac Day as well. So the seats being where they are, that was the idea, plus also if they did end up with a sign, they didn't want to clutter that front area there next to School Road as well. So that's some of the primary thinking.
From my professional background, the seats, there's a congregation area on the opening for Anzac Day is actually quite compromised already. And I believe the seats should be located a wee bit further away from the memorial to actually keep an open space around the memorial for people to congregate on. And so that the idea of the seats being moved further back in more of a meditation type of area than rather than looking at the signs themselves, you know, you can get up and stand up and look at them. Anyway, what I'm asking you is the position of those seats a mandatory thing? Or are they open to suggestion?
John?
We could go back to the club and talk them through if the board wanted to move the location of the seats.
Sorry?
We could certainly go back to the club and talk to them about the seat location if that was a sticking point.
That'd be great, because I had a meeting with Mr. Lenny, because I'm part of the Lions too. I had a meeting with Mr. Lenny, and he sort of agreed that they would probably should be moved further out from the memorial. And for the total reason what I'm saying, you know, and we need as much clean space around that memorial for people to gather on. Anyway, what I was going to propose, that as part of my background and as part of the Lions, I was going to prepare a sort of a basic landscape concept with some pictures of what it could look like, and with the seats where they could be located. Is that okay?
We've got some other questions, so can we have the other questions?
Grant, is there, with the war memorials around the district, does anyone else have a sign?
Generally not a bespoke sign that's individual to it. It's normally quite intuitive as to whether or not there's a war memorial there, or it might actually be named as a reserve as part of the war memorial. This one is within the Woodend Community Centre Reserve, so it doesn't specifically have a sign, but the interpretation is part of the feature, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Grant. Has the RSA been consulted about the location of the seats, since they're generally the organisation that runs events such as Anzac Day?
I would have to double check that with Grant. Sorry, that's not one of the questions that I asked with him, but I could certainly get back on that point. I would be surprised if he hasn't had some form of conversation with them, because they're normally quite in sync with the Lions Club themselves. They certainly have been for the first part of the project, which was the putting up of the feature there.
Just one moment. John, in reply to your question, I know that Grant had quite a conversation with Ian Lenny, because I was copied in to the email trail around location, and they discussed it by email and agreed on this one. There is also a time factor in terms of, I know that the Woodend Lions want the seats installed in time for Armistice Day, and that has been a big push from the Lions Club. So I'm not sure if delaying placement of the seats from the Lions point of view may not be a good idea.
I don't think it matters. The Woodend Community Association are going to install these seats, so where they put them, it doesn't really matter, does it? You know, we can actually put a plan, as long as it's an idea. The seats can go in anyway. Doesn't matter where we put them. They're going to hold it up. They won't hold it up in actual fact in any way whatsoever.
I'm actually prepared to move something, and that is that the seats are installed in the position as indicated, and also that if the Lions Club wants to seek external funding purchase of a sign, then that is up to them, and the installation of that sign. So that is A, B, C, D, and I. A, B, C, D, and E, and I.
Madam Chair, would you be prepared to consider amending?
I think Madam Chair should put her
Right, first.
So it is, he's receiving the report, which is A, noting that the Lions will be donating the seats, noting that the Woodend Community Association are prepared to organise the installation, approving the installation of the location indicated on the attached plan, noting that the Woodend Lions Club would like to install a sign, and then approving the name Woodend War Memorial, not Reserve, because I think that is part of the problem, is it not, Grant? So it would be Woodend War Memorial.
Yes, it would have to say.
Yeah.
It would have to say Woodend War
So
Memorial.
it would be F, but without the reserve at the end, and I, which is approving that the Lions Club can seek external funding to purchase and install the sign if they so wish. So that is the motion that I'm putting.
I'll second that. Oh, sorry.
mover and second have a right to speak first.
My reasoning is that had been discussed within from the Woodend Lions. The Woodend Lions have said, you know, they really want the seats installed for Armistice Day. So I'm happy to go with that. I think the placement, the logic behind that placement, when I read the emails, was good. I also believe that putting money in towards a sign for a war memorial is not warranted. And I cannot justify to the community spending money on installing a sign saying Woodend War Memorial. It's a war memorial, it's very clear that it's a war memorial. It's in Woodend. So I can't justify spending ratepayers' money on that. So that is my justification. And what do you want to say?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm the same. And the reason for my question to Grant was about is there any other signs with war memorials? And as you said, it's very significant, any war memorial. But also to the money, as we know in 2019, we actually gave $5,000 to the war memorial, which I think was significant. And likewise, we need to share as spend with the rest of the community. So I fully support Madam Chair's motion. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move a very minor amendment to clause D by adding the words subject to the RSA's approval.
I'm actually happy with that amendment.
So the board could, if the mover and seconder and the board agreed, they could agree to amend the motion without going through the procedure.
Right. That was what I was trying to do earlier. Well, if Madam Chair, if you are happy to alter your motion, I'll withdraw that.
I'm happy to amend my motion. Andrea, are you still happy to second with that amendment?
I am, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Philip, would you like to speak to?
I'll just speak in support of the motion, Madam Chair. I'm happy with the motion as you've now put it. I think it's very sensible. The RSA are one of the main users of that area, so I think it's appropriate that they be consulted over the location of the seating, which may affect how they organise their events such as Anzac Day, Armistice Day and whatever. Thank you.
Now, anybody else want to say anything?
I quite honestly don't, I object completely. I'd like the amendment to be made that it's up to the Lions to decide where these seats go. Not to be rude or anything, but I think it's the Lions who have the final decision. It's their park. I've talked to Ian Lenny and he understood exactly where we're going. He was very happy with the idea. And so I'd like an amendment that the seats will be installed. They're going to be installed by the Woodend Community Association, and I believe that the discretion should be at the Lions where they go, and not for us to sit here and say that's where they're going to go. You know, the whole point of this.
So, you want to move an amendment before you...
I'd like to move an amendment that the final location of the seats is designated by the Lions Club of Woodend.
Okay, stop there, John.
Location. Perhaps an amendment.
So we've got this amended motion.
Actually, it's probably to D, sorry. Subject to RSA approval and Woodend Lions Club determining the final location would be the amendment, and it would need somebody to second that.
Would you want the RSA approval in there as well, John, or not?
I think RSA would possibly be brought in, yes, of course. So they said that would be, you know, they'd be consulted.
John?
So is there somebody in the second?
Can I just ask a question? Interpreting that D, so with the addition of the RSA, if they, as John has indicated, wanted the seats moved, that would move them, would it? Or are you saying that it would need the Woodend Lions on top of that? Or does the RSA actually have a say in the siting of these seats, from what you've got there?
John's wording was that the Lions Club would determine the location. From his memory.
Okay, yeah, because the Lions Club determine the location. So,
is that right, John?
Yeah, so you're correct. So is there a second?
Is there a seconder for the Lions Club to determine the location, subject to RSA approval?
Can it be with consultation with the RSA and the Lions to approve where they think the location is? Can that be, so the two groups, and once they agree, that's where it goes? If John changes his...
Right, could it be that the final location
I'm very happy with the outcome of that. If we're going to agree, everyone's going to agree with the idea that the Lions and the RSA determine the locations of these. Well, put it this way, consultation with the RSA, so they acknowledge where they're going to go. Thank you.
No, I've got nothing else to say.
Thank you. I certainly support that. I do think what John is saying has merit, because the thing that struck me about that layout is immediately you get a gathering there. They're going to be, even if people are sitting in those seats, there'll be people standing in front of them, obscuring what's going on, and it makes sense to have them, I would say, at the back. But certainly bringing these two parties in to talk it through is an ideal solution as far as I'm concerned, so happy to support it.
Right, I'll put that motion. Does everybody understand what the motion is? Sorry, the amendment is? Pretty clear? Right, I'll put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? That amendment is carried. Any other speakers to the amended motion? Right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Graham. Right, the standing orders. Kay, you're going to take us through that?
Good evening, everyone. This report from Sarah is in connection with basically just officially putting what we've been doing for the last 6 or 7 months into practice and getting it written off, signed off. So it's to do with changing the standing orders to take into account the ability for the board to meet by a technical means, or for one board member to meet, to be included in the meeting if he or she is unable to attend the meeting via technical means. So those are really the only major changes to the standing orders, and we're just looking to update them as of the 12th of October. Happy to answer questions if I can.
Andrea, then.
Okay, I appreciate you can't maybe not answer this question. If we want to suggest an addition to standing orders, what is the process around that? Want to take that?
The process would be, it depends, I suppose, on how substantive that amendment is. If it's reasonably a large amendment, then you would probably want to workshop that. If it's relatively minor, then you would conduct standing orders that look slightly different, and it's within your power to action, and so you could do that as part of your emotional amendment tonight. If it's something significant, the board would probably want to take some further advice on that.
I don't feel that I could actually word it immediately as to how it would read, but I can present the notion for it, whether that is better in a workshop rather than through the meeting. I take your advisement, Jim. Thank you. I feel it would come under conduct, and it's only because I've been part of the rewriting of our constitution of late, and there was an addition that we made to our constitution, and I thought timing was right with standing order. was that if any member of a board is not able to fulfil their role in the full capacity and with coherence, then they would need to actually be addressed by either council or by the chair or both if they were not performing their role to what they've been elected for.
I think the nature of your suggestion is one that probably requires some wider consideration, both in terms of what currently sits in the local government Act, in the Local Government Official Information Meetings Act. So there is eligibility criteria for a member, and it's a fairly high threshold under the Act for who can't stand or be able to stand, and that's somewhat, in the nature of what you've talked about, it would be mental incapacity, which would be quite a test to determine. So I think it would be, we would want to think quite carefully about that. It's something we'd be happy to consider whether the current combination of Act and standing orders enable that, or whether that should be considered in a standing order, and it would be something that would probably apply to all the board. If it was felt it had merit, then it would probably apply to all of the boards rather than just something relatively minor. So I think it would be beyond the scope of the proposed change at the moment, of what's proposed at the moment, and would need further consideration. The Mayor has the unfortunate task of sort of being the broader custodian and portfolio holder of standing orders on behalf of us all, so he will probably want to discuss that further with Sarah, I imagine. If the board were absolutely determined about that, then that's a matter the board could consider at a later date, although I want to get a good report on it.
Andrew, are you happy with?
Just ask Jim, could you pick your microphone up a wee bit? Yeah, my hearing aids aren't picking it up.
Any other questions from anyone? Sorry, it's Philip and then Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a couple of questions. The first one on page 38. In the definition of local authority, does that include a community board? It does, under section 5, is it?
It's defined, so for purposes of the Act, local authority includes a community board.
Right. On page 63, 15.5, 15.3, sorry, time limits. It says speakers can speak for up to 10 minutes. No more than 2 speakers can speak on behalf of an organisation's deputation. Is that 10 minutes per speaker or 10 minutes in total for 2 speakers?
It's usually 10 minutes in total, although the chair always has discretion as to how he or she may apply that during a deputation, but it's generally intended to be 10 minutes. Otherwise you end up with a dozen people coming along talking for 10 minutes each to reinforce the same point, which may not be in the meeting's best interests.
Right, my last question related to page 65, clause 17.1, Code of Conduct Committee. The this is the only reference to a Code of Conduct Committee, unlike the council, which has actually appointed a Code of Conduct Committee. What is envisaged here? What is the composition of the Code of Conduct Committee? Have we got one for the board? And if so, who is it? And when were they appointed? Or does this clause need a little further thought? Oh, sorry.
So there isn't a Code of Conduct Committee established for any of the community boards. If there was a matter to be brought that felt needed to be brought as a Code of Conduct in relation to the community board, it says should a Code of Conduct Committee be called, which is essentially it would require a report from us to establish a Code of Conduct Committee to hear that matter. So the first thing the board would have to do is establish a Code of Conduct Committee, appoint a chairperson to it, and to enable it to act, including terms of reference, which we would probably look to use other terms of reference that have been developed for the council, most likely. And at that point then the process would be determined by both the terms of reference and probably what would be considered fair due process for the consideration of a Code of Conduct matter.
Why I asked was, several years ago, the Kaiapoi Tuahiwi Community Board, I raised the same matter, that if there was a Code of Conduct hearing relating to a board member, who should hear it? And the answer at that time was it would be the Council Code of Conduct Committee, but it was felt appropriate that perhaps a committee of the board members' peers may be more appropriate, or certainly at least having the chair or deputy chair as part of that committee.
So the way the terms of reference, the standing order is currently read, it would be a committee of the board. The board could, of course, nominate whoever it wished to be on that committee. It doesn't necessarily have to be board members, so it could be somebody else to hear a matter if none of the board wanted to. So, provided there was agreement from those who wanted to stand or be part of that committee, and it could include other elected members, including councillors if that were, or council members if that was felt appropriate. So I think they are very broad in how to give effect to it. They are enabling in that regard, so it would be up to the board to decide how it wanted to manage a code of conduct. I think if it's a matter for the board, then it's really the board to decide how a code of conduct matter should be resolved, albeit it may take advice from whoever it seems appropriate in forming that view. So, just to be clear, the code of conduct, you have a code of conduct already, and these are the provisions in your code of conduct. What this matter is bringing before you is a relatively straightforward matter to enable provisions for meeting during the COVID lockdown or post-COVID lockdown and how to deal with that. So this is a relatively small amendment and update to your existing code of conduct. So it's not this is not a new, well, it's a new code of conduct because it's being amended, but it's only being amended rather slightly by what is currently within the standing orders of the board.
One last question on page 97. just a typo, I think. Number 1, after community, the word board has been omitted. And I understood this is the first time the board has had its own specific standing orders. In the past it has used the council's. Is that correct? I've also raised that in the past as well.
That's not my understanding, but I think you've been operating under standing orders off the board. The chair has just presented me with obviously a well-thumbed version, so I presume it's been around. It's been around for some time, so I think this board has already adopted standing orders, and I'd be most surprised if it hadn't. Modified as appropriate for community boards, references to community boards. So it was 2018 was the last time the board adopted it. Thank you.
Whew. I'm tempted to not even ask a question, because one of the nice things about the community board, in my view, is the fact that we stick to the rules, but we don't get too hung up with standing orders. But we've had a good go at it tonight. I just had a very simple set of questions around, deep in the paper was the motions and amendments, like we went through earlier on, and there's some red writing there. Is that red writing, it's not COVID related, I don't think, it's all this stuff about motion moved, maximum 10 minutes, and then further relevant amendments moved, and the red writing, are those refinements or clarification of what was there before, or are they adding in? It's page 89. Appendix 3, motions with amendments and motions without amendments. I just try to understand whether the background to where the red writing, why it was in there, because I don't know what it looked like beforehand.
I think they were changes so that's probably a relevant point. I think there were changes that the council made to provide clarity, so what you've got there is an appendix to help people understand how to interpret the standing orders, and there were some questions at the council about just how did that work, and so some of that red was clarity of thought about the process and making it clearer. So they were, you're right to note that they were brought through from the council in a review.
And it is an addition.
So, well spotted.
Okay.
It's quite a good little, I'm not encouraging anyone to spend any more time on it, but it's quite a good little summary, I thought, of some of this stuff.
You can do it next year, executive at that time.
Just a very quick point, and it's not essential for these standing orders, but under Appendix 5, I had a wee chuckle when it talked about, which is all about the webcasting protocols. So we're trying to bring ourselves into, right now. And item number 4 says PowerPoint presentations, recording of votes by division, and other matters displayed by overhead projector may be sharpened. For some of us of a certain age, overhead projectors mean a very clunky piece of machinery, and perhaps in the future it should be changed to just electronic presentations or presentations using technology, just so that it's not confining itself to PowerPoint, because who knows, Microsoft may come out with something other than PowerPoint as well. Right, any other questions? Right, is somebody happy to move a motion for that we adopt the standing orders? I will move the motion then. Do I have a seconder?
I
I've got nothing to say. John, anything you'd like to say? Anybody else got anything to raise? Right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? That was carried. Right, correspondence. Now we have had an email that came in last night, which was emailed out to you all. Did you all receive that? To be tabled as correspondence? Yeah, there's one issue in there around the private broadband, which probably isn't so much community board, but maybe something that we can direct them to as local MP when one is elected, and Sefton sits in the Kaikoura electorate, so be something. I would say that this is actually the second residence that has raised with me about speeding on Pinkerton's Road. The difference between 100 and the 50k sign, so I think we just need to present these to staff to get some feedback from them. Everybody happy with that? Issues raised? We'll do that. We'll receive that correspondence. Where are we up to? My report. Anybody got any questions around my report, which is on the agenda? I had one addition to that, which is actually no, I've raised it later. So no, I have no other additions. So I will move that my report is received. Do I have a seconder for that? I'll second it, Madam Chair. Thank you, Andrea. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? That's carried. Right, matters for information. We have a list of reports that has been emailed out. Anybody have any questions around them? Do I have someone to move that we receive that information? I'll move the motion. Thank you, Andrea. Do I have a seconder? No. Thank you, Philip. Right, any discussion around those? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? That's carried. Members information exchange. Okay, Andrea, you're up first.
Everything's in there, so thank you, Madam Chair.
To update one item, the Environment Court matter relating to a subdivision of Woodend, which I referred to somewhere in my comments on the 14th of September, I had noted the decision was reserved. The decision has been issued, and the council was successful in opposing the plaintiff's application. So it was round one, but a good result for the council. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any points.
I have one question for the councillor. There was a report at the last council meeting around a plan change for Ravenswood. Could we have an update on how that vote is that progressing to public consultation?
So, through you, Madam Chair, in response, yes, that matter was put to the council in October. It was put to the council in October, and the council approved the plan change for notification to. So it will be it takes a wee while from that point to then get it to the point of public notification, but yes, there will be public notification of that plan change.
Have you got anything you'd like to?
Just a couple of things, one of which I'd like your advice, Madam Chair, on it, but I'd just like to note that those bus route changes have taken effect. I mean, see those certain, like the Waikuku Beach service has been cut back. Is this the appropriate heading to make a comment about this? And if not, there were two matters of the sort of nature that I was a bit confused about where I should say it, or ask the question. I've got a question to ask.
I just noted we've got a forum session afterwards, and I do see Joanne here, so it might be best to deal with that at that time if that's okay.
Nothing else to add.
A couple of items. As you may already know, Plan Change 7 to the Canterbury Land and Water Regional Plan, which attracted 550 odd submissions. The hearings have started, and they are every other week up until December. And it's an plan change, of course, and the legal advice to ECAN from its councillors that the NPS, the new NPS freshwater and the NES rules are to be given legal effect to in this plan change, which means a massive change to land use and within this district. And another item through a water zone, that a very rare kānuka stand in Earwell, 13 hectares, Motu Kānuka, has been bought by DOC, and the IMS immediate steps funding operated through the water zone has granted $10,006 for weed and pest control. This is quite significant. This is the dryland ecosystem of the plains is just about gone, and this is a significant stand right in the middle of a dairy farm which is getting irrigated but has still managed to remain, and DOC has bought it and it will be enhanced. And the other issue which will be of interest to the rural drainage groups, and Sefton has got one that ECAN, or it's got three actually, that ECAN still administers, and the district council has 5 others. Under the NPS and the NES rules, a natural wetland has protection under these NES rules, and this is becoming clear to members, farming people that are around the rural drainage groups. If your land has a natural wetland on it, as identified by ECAN, and it's gone across the district and done aerial mapping at this point, which it wants to get onto people's lands and to verify by examining the land itself, there is to be no drainage work within 100 metres of that wetland. This was a subject last week to extensive discussion at the Central Rural Drainage Group, whereby we had landowners who have aerial mapping of wetlands and are reluctant to let ECAN onto their land to verify that this is a wetland. And as a consequence, if there isn't any what they call ground truthing of the aerial mapping stands, and the Waimakariri District Council is required to give a 100 metres buffer around this area, and it's many hectares on many farms, particularly down Lineside Road, as you can imagine, if you know the lower part of Lineside Road. So this has, again, significant implications for the district and how drainage of the district may or may not be able to continue. So at the moment, Waimakariri District Council staff are talking to ECAN staff to get a common understanding on how this will go forward, bearing in mind that this NES has only come into force at September the 3rd. So again, significant implications for the district and the farming of this district. The impetus behind the NES is to protect prevent the further loss of any wetland, and if you do have a wetland on your property, is to stop your farming of it where it interferes with the hydrology of that wetland and the ecology of it. So interesting times ahead.
Thank you for that. Right, item 11, consultation projects underway. We've got the natural hazards one is still going, that closes on October the 19th. The significance and engagement policy. And Woodend walking and cycling improvements. So they had a drop-in session last week, public session. So that closes on the 22nd of October. Right, board funding update. We didn't spend any money tonight, so that's as stands. Media, anything anybody would like me to highlight? Figure something out. No questions, understanding orders, and no urgent general business, understanding orders. So close that part of the meeting and say thank you very much.